Welcome in this Saturday edition of On Texas Football. I'm Gerry Hamilton. That's CJ Vogel. We're going to kind of recap recruiting. CJ and I were on the road. Texas had a couple of commits this week. We're going to kind of recap the week, get into kind of where things are headed for Texas. Official visits are just 3 weeks away for the Texas Longhorns. June 6th through 8th will be the first official visit weekend. CJ, couple of commits this week. Texas up to 8 commitments in the class. Kind of what were your takeaways from the week, which was a big one for the Longhorns, especially in state?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the focus for me, is making sure that Texas continues to take control or take care of the state of Texas. And you go out, you add a Jermaine Bishop. That's a huge get, Gerry. And I know that you've talked at length about it. Gerry, Bobby, Jeff, Rod had great things to say as well. Heck of a talent, heck of a prospect. Where he plays at the next level, shoot, figure it out when he gets to campus. But to add Yaheem Riley, a guy right in your backyard, a guy who's trained with Band Performance, Bernard Blake down in Austin area, who's produced, Longhorn after Longhorn, All-American Michael Taft, Thorpe winner Jahdae Barron, second-round draft pick Andrew Makuba. That means something. And Yaheem Riley to stay home, to join the Texas Longhorns, a guy that looked up to all of those guys that he has trained with for several years. I think it's a huge commitment for Texas. And, Gerry, I'll even pitch it back to you. With Hayward Howard already in the boat, again, we'll figure out where Jermaine Bishop plays at the next level. I like him more as a cornerback than a wide receiver. I might be in the minority there, but that defensive back class, more than anything over the last week, really starting to take a clearer picture.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I mean, Yaheem Riley is a guy who, and it's interesting because those guys, if we consider Bishop as a corner for this conversation, we'll see which side of the ball he plays on. He's open to the idea of playing defensive back, which I think is big in the equation. Is there 3 different types of players, 3 different frames of players, right? I mean, and that's the thing you look at. Yaheem Riley is that physical nickel player. He comes with SEC physicality ready. Then you have Hayward Howard, a 6'2" and change corner, a long arm guy, a man press type of corner. Then you have Jermaine Bishop, who can probably play about anywhere in the secondary as he fills out his frame, but is a playmaker, is a ball hawk, is a guy who's just so reactive, quick and fast and twitched up. So there are 3 different types of defensive backs, and kind of sets up, if we consider Jermaine Bishop a corner athlete in this part of the conversation, sets up where Texas is headed at defensive back as well. And you look at, before we get into kind of where you and I were on the road and kind of our thoughts from that, let's go Texas 8 commitments now. So there's been so much talk about all the out-of-state official visitors, and that is the case. There is more out-of-state official visitors there than there are in-state. But right now with the 8 commitments, it's 6 in-state players. Texas is taking care of the Houston area with Chris Robertson from Klein. And if you consider Willis, Texas, Houston area, I mean, it's on the outskirt, but it's probably there. Jermaine Bishop, Chris Stewart at Shadow Creek, obviously officially visiting on the 20th. Then up in the DFW area, you have Max Wright in the class committed. And then you have Yaheem Riley from the Syntex area, as well as you have the long snapper at Prestonwood, Christian Trot O'Neill, which is kind of different, separate. Then you have Diabell in Florida, Hayward Howard in Louisiana. And that kind of sets the stage for where you and I spent last week, because this was kind of our week out of state on the road, kind of checking in on some top prospects. And CJ, we'll start with you. You spent some time in Louisiana. Kind of what were some of your takeaways, the Jabari Mack and the Hayward Howard visits?
Yeah, great to see Hayward Howard in action. First time for me to do that. I've seen Jabari Mack through a workout, and seeing him on the field in pads, Gerry, there's a different level to his game that I maybe wasn't expecting. But he looked really good, and I would consider him right in that fold for the top prospects on the board for wide receiver. Of course, we could talk about that here in a bit, but to see both of them, of course, Hayward Howard said that he's completely locked in. Still hearing from LSU, still hearing from Florida. USC, a school that's still kind of in the mold there for him as well, but expected on campus June 6th. LSU expected to get an official visit, but it wouldn't shock me to see him visit Texas for a second time in the month of June, and I think that's going to be very important for the Longhorns there. Of course, for Jabari Mack, committed to LSU, only 2 official visits right now. That's LSU, that's Texas. Chris Jackson had a lengthy conversation with Jabari and his family after the scrimmage on Wednesday evening. But Gerry, just driving around Louisiana, I saw Edna Carr, saw Destrehan High School. Of course, they played together in that spring jamboree, and then I made it to St. Augustine, Brother Martin as well for or a trio of 2027 offers for the Longhorns that week. Gerry, there's a buzz about Texas. And whether it be Chris Jackson, whether it be Mark Orfe, Alan Clark gets a lot of buzz. That's a guy from Baton Rouge that pulls a lot of weight in the state of Louisiana. Folks talked very highly of Alan Clark in the state of Louisiana. And then, of course, Arch Manning. Texas going to generate a lot of hype, a lot of buzz with kids in New Orleans specifically because of Arch Manning, because of Wardell Matt playing at John Ehret as well. Folks are excited about Texas. Of course, now in the SEC, you've seen what they're able to attract talent-wise. You're able to see the product on the field. That all attracts kids from out of state, as we've talked about. New Orleans, no different. And now with Alan Clark, Mark Orfe, Chris Jackson, and Arch Manning and Wardell Mack all being able to produce on the field this fall, Texas is going to be able to have a much stronger pull than I would expect from Louisiana, especially with some of those guys that you would expect to be LSU true leans.
Yeah, that's a good – CJ, I'm glad you said that because I wasn't even planning on going there, but I am going to go there now. A lot of buzz about Texas in the state of Florida. I think we're going to have a video with Diabell where he kind of talks about Texas being the cool school interview I did with him Wednesday. But look, every kid I went and talked to and saw in the state of Florida, Kendall Gerville, obviously very high on Texas. He came out and said Texas was his favorite over Georgia and Florida. Justice Fitzpatrick, unbelievable visit to Texas, him and his family. Georgia probably still the favorite, but Texas is right there in the battle. Obviously, even a kid like Brody Jennings in Mandarin, who I'm not sure Texas will make the final push for, especially with Hayward Howard, Yaheem Riley, Jermaine Bishop committing since I saw him 9 days ago. But Jamie French has so many positive things to say about Texas right now to his friend and former teammate Brody Jennings. Brody Jennings was like, I plan to visit during the season. Again, we'll see. If Texas gets Samari Matthews and either Devon Benjamin or Fitzpatrick, they're probably locked and loaded and done at defensive back. But then, you talk about, you see all those kids. I mean, the Joel Irvin, the kid that the offensive tackle from Fort Myers who's committed to Miami, his coach asked him, hey, because Texas was showing some interest and they were there. And one of his coaches said, do you have interest in Texas? Would you have interest in visiting Texas? He said, it's Texas, man. Yeah, I would. That's kind of the feel we're getting, the vibe we're getting right now.
Very much so.
That doesn't mean Texas is going to get every kid. Don't get me wrong. But what it does say is Texas is resonating on the recruiting trail in states more so than they ever have beforehand. And it's like Bobby and I think we were talking about earlier in the week in Coffee and Football, CJ. We're just now entering the Arch era too. Like, I don't think it's reached its max. It hasn't hit its peak yet. It's going to. But again, some of my stops in the Florida area, Kendall Gerville, obviously Texas fans that are on this channel saw the video. He named Texas kind of his number one right now over Georgia, Florida. He's also going to visit Florida State. Justice Fitzpatrick, Texas is right there for him. I went to Shaman on Madonna. We expect Derek Cooper to set up an official visit here coming up soon. Diabell, great things to say about Texas. Obviously, the Texas commit. He's working on a bunch of other guys in this class. And we continue to see more official visits being set up. We need to talk about this, CJ. Bo Jandro, linebacker from Chandler Hamilton in Arizona, has locked in an official visit to Texas. So Johnny Nanson's been out on the road, California, Arizona, Las Vegas. He went to Hawaii. I think he's also been through Georgia a little bit. But 2 linebackers this week set up official visits. Jandro, a new name to Texas fans. He has Oklahoma, June 20th. USC, June 6th. Washington, May 30th through June 2nd. Texas has entered the race there. And then Xavier Griffin backs off his USC commitment and locks in Texas June 13th through 15th, along with Alabama, Ohio State, and possibly Florida State. But it really feels like Texas and Alabama probably have the edge right now in this recruitment. We don't want to discount Ohio State, but CJ, we talked about it. April was a huge unofficial visit month for Texas, getting a lot of these guys on campus for the first time. And now you're seeing them start to lock in the official visits. And a couple of guys have backed off commitments elsewhere.
Yeah, Jandro, of course, he did lock in for June 6th as well. So that first weekend, Gerry, kind of a primer for what we're expecting to be a massive June 13th weekend for the Longhorns. Now north of 50 officials as well. And we've kind of talked about it. It's kind of that same path for a Jamie French a year ago, a Josiah Sharma, a Myron Charles, all in last year's cycle. You get on campus in the spring, you go watch a workout, you see how the coaches interact, you see the city, the campus, etc. You lock in an official visit, and that's where things really start to roll for the Longhorns. Xavier Griffin, no different here. Of course, you mentioned he backed off of that USC pledge. Texas is going to be a major player in this recruitment. He was actually a name that popped up a little bit on the trail in Louisiana, something that I wasn't expecting to hear. But now that, of course, Texas is here moving in that direction with him, I'm not to say that it's for sure going to follow the exact steps of a Jamie French a year ago, but Texas certainly has experience in that exact position to go get a big fish out of state with this exact blueprint. And we'll see if they're able to execute it once again.
Yeah, so let's review some June 6th official visitors news also from this week. James Johnson from Miami Northwestern, looks like June 6th through 8th is his likely visit date. It's kind of gone back and forth, 6th through 8th or 20th through 22nd. That looks like June 6th. Jamarian Carlton, obviously out of Temple. You put that news out June 6th now. We expect Devon Benjamin from Oaks Christian on June 6th as well. So that early on didn't look like that was going to be a big weekend. Now it's sitting at 10 official visitors that weekend, counting punter from Prosper. Mikey.
I was going to add him as well. That's an interesting one, Gerry, because we talked about Trot O'Neill already in the fold. Texas, the debate of whether they go straight portal, straight high school kids. Texas still interested in high school kids to come in at those specialist positions. And I'll add this on Devon Benjamin. I don't know if there's a player in that defensive back room higher on the board in terms of versatility, talent, etc., than what he is out of the West Coast.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what's left, the three defensive backs with official visits that are not committed to Texas right now. Samari Matthews, obviously, Texas or Clemson's probably the top two. We don't want to desk down anybody in the NIL area. South Carolina, FSU getting visits, but it really feels like Texas, Clemson out front, and Texas may have a slight lead there right now. Justice Fitzpatrick, Devon Benjamin. I mean, that's where we're at with defensive back recruiting, and your hope is to get two of those three. And if you do that, you close out a 4-man class, and with Jermaine Bishop, potentially a 5-man class, and everybody would be happy with that on the 40 acres if that ended up being your class, getting two of those last three guys officially visiting. Same can be said, obviously, for defensive line as well. I mean, Kenny Baker was about everywhere in the last 2 weeks. He was in Alabama. Then he went over up to New Jersey to see Damari Simeon. Then he was down in Florida. Then he was up in the Atlanta area seeing defensive line targets. So these positions, I think we're starting to see maybe the cream rise to the top here as Texas sets up these final official visits in the next week headed into that official visit period. All right, CJ, this was just a little quick update we wanted to give Texas fans. Your closing thoughts on kind of where Texas is at right now and where we're headed going into June.
Yeah, of course, you mentioned the cream rising to the top, especially in the out-of-state scale. You factor in some of these top prospects from the in-state stuff. It wouldn't surprise me to see a heavier out-of-state class once again in terms of commitments, signees, etc. Maybe by a pretty considerable margin, and I say considerable, probably 4 or 5, maybe. Just in the sense of what Texas is attracting, how Texas is recruiting nationally. You mentioned it. Some of the kids that you saw out in Florida, yeah, they're interested in Texas. And kind of that quote that resonated was, it's Texas. Well, I heard that exact same sentiment in Louisiana. Yeah. And now, when Texas goes out and they offer Easton Royal out of Brother Martin, Raquan Williams out of St. Augustine, these kids look at it a little bit differently, saying, yeah, I probably was going to stick around home. LSU tough to beat, but with what Texas is accomplishing on the field, I at least got to give them a chance. And that's something that I think has built up over time, obviously building from 5 and 7 to back-to-back Final Fours, Gerry. Texas can walk in, kind of puff up that chest a little bit, put that Longhorn logo out there and say, hey, this is what it is like at Texas. You're going to develop, you're going to play, you're going to compete and win. And I think recruits like that, right? I think that's going to make college a little bit more enjoyable for them. So that's something that I picked up pretty heavily in Louisiana. Also, I wanted to mention on the defensive line front, he teased it on Twitter. Of course, it doesn't matter until he gets to campus, but 5-star Lamar Brown saying, hey, maybe I got to go see Texas. I got to stop over in Austin. That was Alan Clark, as I mentioned, stopping by University Lab to go to go speak with the 5-star LSU commit. I also saw a 5-star LSU commit Richard Anderson. I don't think anything's going to move in that direction right now for Texas, at least not currently. There are some factors pulling in the Longhorns' direction there. So we'll see if they're able to make some headway. But Lamar Brown's going to be an interesting one. If he pops up on campus at any point, game on.
And I'm going to leave the Texas fans with this. So when you're on the road, you pick up some things. And that could be talking to other college coaches, nothing from Texas staff, or talking to high school coaches. Because remember, some of these high school coaches I talked to on the road, maybe they had a player at Jamie French at Texas, or maybe they know somebody close to the Texas program. And so in my conversations, there were 2 names brought up of freshmen. Nick Brooks, once again, was brought up. Is like, it's just people are talking to the members of the Texas staff saying Nick Brooks, unbelievable spring and unbelievable prospect. I was told Jamie French had a really solid spring. And then another name that was brought up was James Simon last week in Florida, by the way, in the state of Florida was
Great
brought
sign.
up to me. Yeah, that's a good sign for James Simon. I was just told don't sleep on James Simon. And that was the word from somebody that they talked to over on the 40 acres. The word was don't sleep on James Simon. So that's what we'll leave that with, Texas fans. Everybody have a great Saturday night, Sunday. We'll be back with the Sunday live stream. For CJ Vogel, I'm Gerry Hamilton. Thanks for tuning in.